Thursday marks the 30th anniversary of the death of Hawkeye basketball standout Chris Street. He was killed when the vehicle he and his girlfriend were in was struck by a plow truck along Highway 1 in Iowa City after leaving a team dinner. And KCRG TV9 sports director Scott Saville and John Campbell both covered Street, of course, when he played at Iowa. They're joining us right now. Let's start with you, actually, Scott. Tell me a little bit about Chris Street, the player.
Future NBA player.
Sure.
Yeah, incredible length, energy, size, quick jumper. I call him a quick jumper, kind of like a Dennis Rodman. But most of all, he loved being a Hawkeye. Since he was a little boy, he wanted to be a Hawkeye, so it meant everything to him. And other players have kind of emulated that over the years. Jeff Settles, you know, they were around, they saw that. Same kind of energy, just a fierce, fierce competitor.
Well, and he was coming off of a game where, you know, against Duke, where he was such a star in that game.
Yeah, he broke the all-time consecutive free throw record. I remember I was very good friends with Chris, and I had gone out with him and Kenyon Murray right before that game, and he was really excited to get to go play at Duke. And one thing I'll always remember about Chris is his smile. He had a smile, not when he was playing, but when he was off the court, constant smile and just a love of life and energy, and he was so jacked up, not just to have a chance to break that record, but just to go play at Duke and show off his talent.
Yeah, and John, you got to cover him for so long. I mean, he had to impress you from the start almost.
He really did. You know, we came in, he had been a great high school athlete, so we knew coming in what he was going to bring to the table. But Scott kind of said it, the energy that he brought and the excitement and the love of being a Hawkeye. And it came through. And, you know, he was the spirit of the team, I think. There's no doubt about that.
Well, and that's a big important thing, is that not only was he a player, he was truly a team leader and someone you wanted to emulate on campus or in life.
He was a great leader in that way, and the guys did look up to him, and they followed him, and yeah, that's what was so tough when he was lost. I mean, he wasn't around anymore, and a lot of that energy and leadership had to be replaced, and was hard to do.
Yeah, well, Kenyon Murray was just coming in as a young freshman, and Chris took him under his wing. They were inseparable because Chris knew he had to teach him the game and about Iowa and about life. And he did, and obviously Chris Murray named his son after Chris Street, different spelling with a K, but it meant so much to him. And Chris Street, in that short amount of time, meant so much to him that he named his son after him.
John, 30 years ago, yeah. I know in so many different ways, it still seems like yesterday. I mean, it was a true shock to the system when you heard this news.
I was in the newsroom, and we'd heard about this crash down by Coralville, down by I-80 in the Highlander, and one of our photographers, Jerry Palmer, was sent out to cover it, and pretty soon we'd heard that it might be an Iowa basketball player, and a little later on we heard it might be Chris Street, but they hadn't confirmed the name, and back in those days there was no internet, none of that going on, so we're sitting here trying to get the information we can. But we can't go on the air at 10 o'clock and say an Iowa basketball player's been killed in a car crash, you know. So we're really up against the clock, and all of a sudden, right before 10 o'clock, they released Chris's name. So we were able to go on the air and confirm everything that had happened. But boy, leading up to that 10 o'clock, what was tough, because we can't use, and we didn't use, any information that hadn't been confirmed at that point.
It was an incredibly tough day. Yeah. I was off that day. I actually worked for the competing station. I think they're called KGAN, something like that. But anyways, I worked there, and Mike Ducey, the sports director, had called me. It was my day off. I was at my parents in Waterloo. Driving back, when I found out, I had to pull over. I just broke down in tears.
It was hard not to take it personally.
Yeah, he was such a great guy, and such a, you know, and I don't become that close with a lot of athletes, especially in college. I was a little bit younger then, so, but his spirit, you just wanted to be around him. And so I became very close to him in a short period of time, and I just couldn't take it. I pulled over and just sat there and cried.
Does it still make you think about the what ifs?
Oh my goodness. I think of the what ifs because of Kenyon. And the man Kenyon, this will be hard. The man Kenyon became, the family man raising his family, and everything that Chris missed out on. that he would have been the same kind of family guy. It's just so hard to think about everything that he could have been, and the relationship I've had with Kenyon over the years. It's really hard to think about, what he could have been, not just on the basketball floor, but off the basketball floor.
John, that's the legacy.
It is a legacy, and I remember after we did the 10 o'clock news that night, then I stayed around and gathered up all the file video I could of Chris and put together about a 3-minute piece so they would have it for the morning show and the next day and things like that. And, I was so into the job at that point, I was really focused. But when I walked out of this building at about 3 in the morning, I started to cry. Yeah, I started to cry, and I don't know of another sports story in Iowa over the years has made me do that, but it really hit home. It really hit home.
Scott, tell me about those days afterwards, the reaction among the fans, among the people after that initial shock.
Well, everybody loved Chris Street, so the shock was really hard to get over. John got the T-shirts that came out with. Everyone in the state of Iowa had this T-shirt, and it meant so much to people, the pride of Chris Street. And then the team had to go on. That was the difficult part. They had to go on and play, and they had some real leaders on that team that took over his role, that they won some huge games.
Yes, they did. Yes, they did. You want to talk about that? They went up to Michigan State, and they were trailing like 15 points with 3 minutes to go, and they just came alive. And Val Barnes and A.C. Earl, and they won that game in overtime. I don't know how.
Spirit of Chris Street.
The spirit of Chris Street. I thought of that the other day when that Buffalo Bill returned that kickoff a few days after their teammate had gone down.
Yeah.
And it was the same kind of situation. There was no way to explain it because Iowa hardly ever won at Michigan State. They were down 15. But my goodness, they came back and won that game. There was something magic happened. I believe it.
I mean, let's talk about this legacy. I mean, number 40 is retired. Tom Davis called him the greatest Hawkeye in history, and that's true today.
Yeah, he'll never, ever be forgotten in the state of Iowa.
Why is that?
Well, because of the person that he was. His smile alone would just, he was so infectious. And he had so much love and energy for the game of basketball. All you had to do is watch him play. And he's flying around the rim, getting rebounds, putbacks. And he wanted to be a Hawkeye his whole life. So that was so important to him that he showed that on the court. And it was just infectious, his personality and his style of play.
Well, John, let's talk about the fact that he is still very much in the minds of Hawkeye coaches and players today.
Oh, I think so. If you go down and get to go in the tunnel at Carver Hawkeye Arena, there's a plaque right outside the locker room, and it's been there since he was killed. And all the young Hawkeyes are told the story. They learn the story of Chris Street. And at the end of the season, they always hand out a Chris Street Award. And I'm thinking that's probably the one most players would like to win and feel the best about because. 30 years later, and he has not been forgotten. And I don't think he'll ever be forgotten in the near future because so many people are still here that were around 30 years ago when this tragic accident happened.
Yeah, I just stop and I just stare at the photo. Just think about him when I walk by.
Well, also take me back to 2018 and Jordan Bohannon. The ultimate show of respect.
Yeah, and another Iowa kid that always wanted to play for the Hawkeyes. And there's no way, if you know his parents too, Mike and Patty, just great people, and they were close to Jordan. There was no way Jordan was going to make that free throw. No doubt in my mind that he was going to miss that.
I thought that was one of the real neat moments when Jordan Bohannon just put it off the front of the rim or whatever and didn't make it. That was something special. And you know, that game was still close at that point.
It was within single digit
at that point. And
no way.
We're not going to make this one. And
that was great.
That spoke volumes for Jordan too.
Of course, his Chris Street Award exemplifies the spirit, enthusiasm, and intensity of Chris Street. Those are three perfect attributes.
They are, and a lot of players have adopted that over the year. The one that really comes to mind that came right after Jess Settles, played a lot like Chris Street. And I'm sure some of that came from Chris Street, because if you watched him play on the court, you would want to play like him.
And is that so? I mean, is that the way the game should be? Is that the way an athlete should be?
It should be, and Scott just reminded me of something. Over in Iowa State, the Cyclones, one Cyclone player a year would wear number 40. Fred Hoiberg was one of those who wore number 40 in honor of a guy who played at the University of Iowa. I thought that spoke volumes also.